I am talking now with Freya Secrest, who is the Director of Education for the Lorian Association, an organization dedicated to spiritual education, and they have a lot of online classes, so I encourage you to check those out. She's also the author of the book, Showing Up, a series of spiritual practices, and a spiritual director. So in particular, Freya, I would like to talk to you today about subtle energies. And for those who aren't familiar with the term subtle energies, what are they?
Great, thanks for having me, Thomas. You know, subtle energies it's a very broad term that we use to just recognize that they're unseen forces that influence life in our world. The worldview that I work with says that we incarnate into a whole world that's both physical and non-physical. And we ourselves are both physical and non-physical. Our thoughts and our feelings have no physical shape, but they can definitely influence the world and influence things and events in the world. My friend David Spangler, one of the teachers of this colleague in Lorian, defines subtle energies as qualities and forces that fill the non-physical world in the way that sunlight fills the physical air around us. So sunlight we recognize, we see, as it were, but it's not really a physical phenomenon. You put your hand through it. So it's an important point to notice around subtle energies that we're not just talking about psychic information here or psychic intuition. Awareness of subtle realms, subtle energies doesn't need special talents or abilities. What it does require is attention and intention and patient discernment. And one way to start working with subtle energies is to work with it through our own sensory vocabulary. And that sensory vocabulary is something that we have not worked with a lot in our current sort of scientific realm. We recognize sight, sound, hearing, smell, but there are other senses that have been identified by the medical community, the scientific community, that are senses of perception, and we might call these more subtle. They are things that we recognize really more out of our whole body. They're somatic senses. We use the whole body as the vehicle of perception, not a special organ like our ears or our nose. And these senses form the backdrop of our lives. We're using them all the time to orient ourselves. That's things like proprioception, which is our sense of position in the world and movement in space. Our perception of pain or pressure or touch. Temperature is another way, a sensitivity and an awareness, and balance. And these are what for us are more subtle, more untouchable, but they're very tangible, they're very recognized, they're very much a part of our world. So the nature of our senses gives us a way of in this physical realm with our special senses like that we observe with, sight, sound, and then these somatic senses which we participate in the world through. These senses open up the door into some of the more extended subtle worlds that we're talking about here in our conference that we'll have in September. So one of the key things about this expanded subtle world is that it is a world of participation. It's a world where we need this whole, the whole of ourselves in order to work with and interpret. And that's this participatory wholeness, that's a capacity that we have. It's part of us, just coming back all the way through to these internal senses that bring us links more strongly with the unseen non-physical worlds around us.
Freya, how did you become aware of subtle energies in your life?
Well, I visited Findhorn in early 1970s, and I lived there 3 years at that time, and it was Dorothy McLean's writings from the devas that really first opened me to this kind of participatory relationship with a living world, with a physical and non-physical realms. Dorothy's messages opened me up to the idea of a living universe, that there was an ensouling intelligence in everything, rocks, plants, trees, and even a machine. So I was very captivated and asked to read her messages, and they just opened up a new way of looking at the world as a thou, as sort of a real connected partner, friend that I could relate to. Each of her messages from the different devas that I read, they carried a different quality, and that word quality is what David used in terms of talking about subtle energies. It's how I have framed some of the essences that I began to be more aware of, put my attention and intention to coming to understand more. So that came alive to me in the 70s, and one of the examples of that was I was walking through the original garden one evening. I was on my way to sanctuary, and at that time the plants were all grown in more traditional rows. We had a row of carrots, a row of cauliflower, a row of lettuce, a row of spinach, and it was all very very nice straight lines. And I liked to dance, so that there was no one else in the garden at that point. And so as I was walking through, I just stopped and was looking at the lettuces, and I did a little dance. I mean, I just moved. I'm somebody who moves. And then just on a whim, I went down to the next row of carrots, and I did another dance and noticed that there was a different movement that came out for me between one row and the next. And so that evening I went up and down the rows of vegetables dancing different dances, and it felt to me as if I was understanding each of those qualities of the vegetables differently, that somehow the movement and the motion that came to me, I felt inspired in each of the different rows, gave me a little bit more of the character of each of those different plants. So that was, I think, the beginning. I felt I took a step in awareness into the inner life of nature, into the inner qualities that were carried, and a particular way that I could perceive them through movement. Dorothy wrote beautiful messages, but I had a movement for each one that was really helped me identify with it. Just recently I saw the movie A Wrinkle in Time, and in the movie they visited a different planet where there's a character called Mrs. Whatsit, and she makes a comment that, oh, you don't know how to speak flower. You know, the flowers speak in color. They speak color, and you don't speak color. And I thought that was just such a wonderful characterization about our world. And it's like, and other forms of life in our world, they speak a different language. Flowers speak color. And it made me stop and think, well, how do I speak color? And it made me realize that in very simple ways, when I get dressed in the morning, I'm very aware of the color that I put on, what I want to choose to surround myself in a day. And that has an impact, and people notice as I walk through the world that day, whether I'm being loud or whether I'm being quiet, with my choice of color. So it's just that's a very specific and sort of ordinary way that we work with subtle energies just without really thinking it. So that's one of my examples of working with subtle energies.
Mm-hmm. Great. Another example of work with subtle energies that Lorian teaches is energy hygiene. And I know it has other names, but could you explain what that is?
Well, energy hygiene, we also, excuse me, energy hygiene is something that we have sometimes also called energy tending. It's a way of being aware and paying attention to these qualities and emotions as well, but the qualities that we're putting out into the world, the surrounding field of our interest and intent. I can be angry and put out an energy that's pretty intense. Probably more I notice it when someone else comes towards me and they're very angry, upset about something. I can almost feel it like a, a, a punch or a surrounding whoosh as they walked by. I noticed it recently when I was in Santa Barbara, where they've just had mudslides and floods, and quite a bit of trauma had happened in this particular area where I was going to visit a friend. And we, off the freeway, you could see that there was damage that had been done and such, but but when we pulled off the freeway and into this neighborhood, there was no immediate damage, but there was a quality of upset that was there in the field of just that neighborhood, because of what they had gone through, that really felt like a punch in the stomach to me. So that was, so energy hygiene itself is methods and techniques that we have for working with these non-physical forces or influences. And I, as you will notice in some of these, some of my examples, I like to start really simple. I think that's the most effective way, because it's the most immediate for me. And there's, in terms of working with my own flows of energy, my own dynamic of energy, there's three things: flow, positivity, and connection. And if I start there, I'm really working with the first place that I can control, which is my own presence, my own standing, and my own energy levels. So for me, flow is about movement. And oftentimes when I get stuck, if I'm in a meeting where I'm feeling upset or the conversation isn't going the way I want to, one of the ways that I have in working with my energy and sort of tending to my energy is to notice, first to notice that I'm feeling stuck. And it's like, if I notice this sort of grumpiness coming up, I kind of step back and say, aha, let's bring our attention back to the moment and what's impacting you. And what can you do to move out of this stuck feeling? Well, I can't always just hop out and leave a meeting and say, well, I'm done. But what I will do to get movement going is to, I'll just move my feet underneath the table in sort of a rhythmic movement. I might massage a finger. I will do some small thing to get energy moving in me, to get some rhythm going. And what that does is it helps me to recalibrate my whole body so I'm not feeling so blocked up. And I can move then back to a place where I can be more of a contributor, or I can make a suggestion that we change the topic of conversation. But I can do it in a way which really leads to a positive way forward. The second one, positivity, is slightly different, and that is, if you think of electricity, when one has a positive charge, things don't stick. They tend to be it moves out in a way. So if I feel something, sort of an uncertain experience where I might be nervous or anticipating a bad reaction to something I'm going to share, either with a person or even in just like a personal relationship, I find my best defense against sort of a negative reaction that I'm anticipating is a good offense. So I'll find a way to come at something from a positive perspective, and I will look for what's a good option here. What's maybe some way it could be contributing? What's its strong point, or what's a person's strong point? If I can look and find a point of positivity, which is not about making everything all pink clouds or ignoring difficulties, but it is looking for a point of positivity that will allow energy to expand and be in a flowing place. So my best defense is a good offense, is putting out a positive charge into the world. And the third thing that I will do just for myself as a practice is this idea of connection. And in a way, it incorporates the first two, but it's an attitude. Connection is an act, but it's also an attitude that supports and initiates participation. It doesn't isolate, it doesn't separate, it connects. So, and when I'm in connection, I have a stronger, wider field of possibilities to draw upon. So we do something like that. Sometimes we've called it the touch of love, but it's if I'm in this, if I'm feeling very alone and very isolated, I will find a way to make a connection with the world around me. Something that I notice is beautiful, something I notice if I want a quality of strength, I might think of a leopard or a lion or a bear, bringing in an ally uh, of connection. Just that idea can open up the doors and again create more possibilities for where the next step can go.
So my final question, Freya, imagine that lots and lots of people become aware of subtle energies and are working with them in a positive way. What would this do to the world?
That's big. Let me start with what it's done for me. It's for me working with understanding that there's the subtle energies and it's a living universe, but also with energy hygiene, where I work more consciously with these flows of energy. It's given me more of a sense of control. I can choose how to respond in a situation. I know my capacity, I have the capacity to make a choice. And what that opens up for me is a sense that I can contribute to life and build it in a nurturing way. So I'm a participant and I'm a partner. Just like the title in our conference, I'm a co-creator. I step into the capacity to make a difference. So if everyone or vast numbers of people were working with energy hygiene, what would it be like? I think there would be a lot more listening in the world because that's part of what creates partnership. I think there would be a greater flow and a great deal of vibrancy because we would be drawing not only on each other but on the inner life of an intelligence of the plant kingdom, of the whole wider world. I also think that what we create as humans, because that is a gift that we offer to the world, will be more integrated into the world as whole. So that which we create will have more opportunity to contribute to the whole cycle of life. In that way, we will be more ecological in all that we create. Those are some things. There probably will be others.
Nice. Thank you very much, Freya.
You're very welcome. You had asked me at one point, Thomas, if if I had any recommendations for people to follow up with. Mm-hmm. And if folks were really interested in knowing more about subtle energies, I would recommend the book, Working with Subtle Energies by David Spangler. Mm-hmm. Definitely a plug for a colleague, but I find that book has really helped widen my understanding of subtle energies, as I said, not just from a psychic perspective, but from a very hands-on, present, and possible for me to work with perspective. And the other one I think is by Dorothy McLean, your Findhorn Dorothy. I think to hear the angels sing, as I said, it certainly my connection with nature and the fact of what they worked with around encouraging love in Dorothy's discovery of that realm and through the garden at Findhorn. I think that's one of our primary subtle energies that we have access to and links us with the whole world.
So what is your cutting edge around subtle energies, Freya?
Very interesting. I would say my cutting edge around subtle energy work is trusting myself. And that's trusting what I perceive. So, okay, there's these various forms of information that I can get, and I can work on learning how to listen to them better. But I'd say that the cutting edge for me is trusting that and loving my own particular unique way of perceiving. I've spent a lot of years wishing that I could get messages or paint pictures or do some of these beautiful artistic pieces that other people have done with their subtle connections. And I don't do that. And I have felt very simple with that. So the edge has been for me to deepen into this and appreciate my own sense of knowing and my own sense of standing there, and being present to it has allowed it to deepen and become a little more artistic and I don't know that I would say inspiring, but it's been so enriching, enlivening for me to have this relationship with a whole world, a whole sort of both what I see and what I can sense, and letting these subtle senses, these somatic senses, letting myself listen with my full self and all my capacities. It's exciting to me because it's opening up new doors. I'm quite enjoying the work that I've been doing lately, which is these fellowship circles that I do, where I invite in not only people but subtle beings, and that was a big step for me. That was rather audacious to think, and the perception of that is just that there's an awareness and appreciation of being invited. I think that what's exciting about the conference that we're going to be doing, what's exciting about the possibilities of this work, and recognizing that we have a living universe where there are intelligences and forces, and sentiency, not necessarily human intelligence, but flower intelligence and rock intelligence, that those coming together opens up possibilities which I don't have a lot of words for yet, but they're very exciting. They make my toes twinkle. In my movement sort of way, that's what happens.
Nice. Thank you very much, Freya.